Hello everyone and welcome to the Proc. I'm your host B and we're here to help you level up your game once again. In today's topic, we're going to be talking about artifacts. So, with the artifacts, we're going to be talking to someone special today. Please welcome our guest, B. Please introduce yourself. Hello everyone, I'm B. I'm an endgame player. I'm a member of SSA or Say Swag Again. I've been playing the game for about 7 years, but I don't think I really started playing the game properly until about after SWC 2018. You just said playing it properly. What do you mean by that? It wasn't until SWC 2018 when I was sitting with a lot of the high-level players, and the entire time during the show, they were literally farming the entire time. And this was back before repeat battle, so these guys were hitting that replay button like every 30-40 seconds for like 5 or 6 hours straight, and I was like, wow, I've been playing this wrong the whole time. You know, that sounds really eye-opening. But I mean, to focus on the reason we have you today, artifacts. How important do you think artifacts are? I would argue if you're an endgame player, artifacts are probably the most important thing to farm. Of course, if you're still like in the earlier mid-game stages, runes are probably more important. But once you have enough runes to equip your teams and monsters, you really should be focusing on artifacts. And I really feel like people undervalue how much artifacts can help them. You just said you feel like people undervalue artifacts. What do you mean by that? I feel like since artifacts are still relatively new, people don't really understand how much they can help improve your account. For the longest time, runes are really the only big thing to farm. But really, I feel like artifacts can benefit your account and your box and your strength a lot more than runes can in some cases. Could you give us an example of how artifacts would benefit someone more so than runes? The best example I can give are the artifacts you would get from Steel Fortress, which give you increased damage into a certain element or decreased damage from a certain element. Think about a unit like Diana. You know, it's a wind unit and you basically only bring it into heavy water compositions, and it's kind of like a water killer. So if you get, let's say, 2 max blue rolls and you get a plus 15% additional damage to water, you're doing 15% additional damage to water just straight up. Now, if you wanted to get that same amount of, battle stats in your runes, you would kind of have to improve your runes by 15% in strictly, damage statistics, which these days is going to be pretty hard to do, especially if you're an endgame player. That makes perfect sense to me. And I guess since we're talking about the importance of farming in the game, on average, how much would you say you farm in a given day? I'd say I farm most of the day. If the game is on, then I'm farming. So that should probably give you an idea. You're really focusing on those artifacts. Could you let us know what teams you're using for both Steel Fortress and Punisher's Crypt? Sure, I use a typical team. I think most players out there are using this team, and if you're not, you should really get on that. And that's a Lucian lead, a 2A Sath, 2 Melias, which is a Wind Dryad, and a 2A Tatu. And they move in that order. So my Lucian goes, my Sath goes, both Melias go, and the Tatu goes. If everything works out perfectly, you're gonna be getting like 30-second average runs. Punisher's Crypt, I've basically been using the same team since the first month when artifacts first came out. When people realized you could just run a Kali, 2x Rauk, Fire Homunculus, and Crow. Obviously since then, I've 2A'd my Kali, but 2A wasn't available back then. But it worked perfectly fine before the 2A, so I wouldn't say that's necessarily needed. But of course, you're gonna get more stats, so it's gonna make the run safer. But you can also just go with the typical triple Ikaru team, which is 3 Ikarus and Verd. Whatever preference you have. I personally didn't like going with the Verd triple Ikaru because it was like 20 seconds slower, so up to you. For those of you at home who actually want some tips on how to build these teams, why don't you check out these 2 great videos from Evan and Seppi right over here. If you could say one was more important than the other, which one would you say is more important? I think it's really hard to say that one is more important than the other. I feel like both are really important, but I guess if I had to pick one, I would say that farming Steel Fortress is probably more important because the effective battle stats you get from the plus minus elemental damage is like really big. But like Punishers is really important too because you want to get those high rolls into recovery, you want to get those high rolls into crit damage, you want to get those high rolls into additional damage. So both are very important. For our viewers at home who don't know what you mean by that, could you explain what you mean by a high roll? if you press on it, you actually get to see the property range. So this is a wind artifact, HP base. The damage received from dark is a 6 out of 6, so that's a high roll. Then we have attack plus proportionate loss HP up to 12. 12 out of 14, that's like a mid roll, right? And then we have damage dealt on fire plus 3 out of 5, that's min roll. So, you know, high, mid, low, low is min, you know. Typically, I would say my standard usually is a triple roll or 2 high rolls and a mid to high roll on a desirable stat. What would you say are the desirable stats you'd be wanting to look for in your artifacts? Yeah, so you know, that artifact I was showing you, we did finish powering it up, and it went to life drain 17, damage dealt on water 8, and damage dealt on light max roll, which is good. But you know, the rest of the rolls are kind of bad, so, and it really doesn't have a lot of synergy like the stats, so this is probably a sell. Could you showcase some of your artifacts for our viewers so they get an idea of what to look for? It does get a little bit tricky, but I would say a general rule of thumb, especially for elemental artifacts, is that you just want to get stats for the opposite artifact, or for the opposite element. So basically, if you're trying to do more damage and it's a wind artifact, you want to get damage dealt on water. Now, if you're trying to be tankier and it's a fire artifact, you probably want to get damage received from water down, right? Because generally speaking, you know, with the way the AI works, it's always going to be like prioritizing the opposite element. One easy example is like skill 2 recovery. You know, Fran, Lulu, Triana, they all benefit from it, and it really increases the amount of healing that you can get, especially if you get like a high triple roll. Like, you know, if you get 24% increased recovery on skill 2, that's a lot of additional healing that you're getting. And then from there, you know, any monster that has a multi-hit, like Sierra, Juno, any of the oracles really, you really want to just get be stacking like additional damage so you can potentially like increase their damage output. But yeah, this gets really tricky, and honestly, even for me, like I have a really hard time like figuring this out sometimes. So, you know, there's a lot of like good resources out there that you can use that can kind of help you get a better idea of which artifacts can be used by certain monsters. Could you showcase some of your artifacts for us and explain why you equip those to those monsters? Yeah, absolutely. I guess the first monster I'll show, since we already kind of talked about it earlier, is Ikaru. So, you know, as people know, the first most important thing about Ikaru is to make sure that you're hitting that defense break point to get that quad team up. So depending on whether you need defense or not, you probably want to focus on having defense main set on both sides. That way, it really helps you get to that defense break point. That's the first thing. And then I guess if you look at the elemental side, I actually am using this artifact because it does 11% to damage dealt by attacking together. And obviously with the Ikaru team, you're always going to be attacking in team up. So that means every time this Ikaru attacks from my water side, I am getting 11% additional damage. Viewers at home, if you want to learn more about building that Ikaru team, check out this great video from Evan and Seppi. Yeah, and I guess the next monster that I want to talk about is Lulu. It's a pretty straightforward monster. You know, Lulu's role is really to survive and heal. So if you look at my Lulu here, on the element side, I have damage received from wind minus 22, right? Typically, you know, wind units are going to be what are hitting Lulu, and they're going to be the ones doing the most damage. So, you know, makes sense. And then on the right side, I have skill 2 recovery by 23. And again, you know, Lulu's job, once again, survive and heal. So, you know, really getting that extra healing from Lulu is pretty substantial. The last example I'll give is a PvP monster, which is Diana. Like we said earlier, Diana's basically only used into water monsters. So if you look at my artifact here, I have 15% damage dealt on water. And then again, you know, as I said earlier, you know, Diana in her human form hits multiple times. So you want to try to get additional damage on it as well. So I have additional damage by attack, additional damage by HP, and the crit damage up by 5%. So this is, I would say this is like a pretty decent artifact. Of course, it would be preferable if there were higher rolls, but they have a lot of synergy with one another. And then when you go to my type side, this one's not as good. I didn't really have a lot of good HP artifacts with high rolls of additional damage that I could use. So I went with accuracy because it is still pretty important for Diana to be able to Lando stuns in pony form, and then, you know, strip in human form. Wow, that's a lot of information, and I think it's going to be really helpful for our viewers at home. So, you know, thank you so much for your time and, you know, dropping all this knowledge on us. Is there anyone you want to shout out or say before you go? Yeah, thank you for having me on, and I really do hope this was helpful for you guys at home. I do stream every now and then, so you can feel free to check me out at Twitch, twitch.tv/BG3. And then I want to give a huge shout out to my guild, SSA, especially to Français, who's someone who helped me personally get a better understanding of artifacts. And, you know, if you are an endgame player and, you know, looking to be in a competitive Siege guild, SSA is always looking for new members, so feel free to, you know, apply. Thank you again so much for your time. And for those of you at home, what do you want to see next time? Or what topics would you like to see covered? Until then, I'm your host B, and this is the Proc. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. If you want to see more summer tour content, check out videos like this. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.